Rouke from RICS. I'm sorry that I can't present live to you today. We've had some technical issues, so I'm recording this ahead of time. But I'm very pleased to be invited to talk to you today about professional ethics and conduct. Obviously, I'm going to do this from the perspective of RICS, but I'm also going to talk about some of our initiatives which will be relevant to you even if you're not a member of RICS. I'm hoping that most of you will already know something about RICS, about the organisation. We're a global professional body for property professionals. Our membership spans a wide range of surveying disciplines across construction, valuation, land, and obviously both residential and commercial property management, including facilities management. Being a member of RICS or one of our regulated firms mean that you sign up to a set of standards and ethical values that will govern how you practice. So we have technical standards, but we also have sort of overarching rules of conduct. And when you apply to become a member of RICS, when we assess you to become a qualified member, we will check that you understand those rules and those ethics, and that you know how to apply them in practice. And then we continue to regulate our members and our firms against those standards throughout the lifetime of their membership. Where things seem to have gone wrong, we'll give advice and support to help people come back into compliance with the standards. In very rare cases where someone can't or won't comply with our standards, we do take disciplinary action against members and firms and might even remove them from membership or regulation. Our standards are really important to us because they provide confidence to clients and to stakeholders. That means that when they choose an RICS firm or an RICS member to deliver services to them, they can have confidence about the behaviour that they can expect from that person or that firm. A couple of years ago, we did some research with clients and stakeholders to find out what was important to them when they engaged a professional, when they engaged a firm. I don't think any of these will come as a surprise to any of you. I would expect that this is exactly the list that when you're thinking about the professionals that provide services to you, accountants, lawyers, other property professionals, you would expect to see. Obviously, you would want them to be focused on your needs and your expectations, but you would want them to be competent and to stay competent throughout their professional life. So understand how to use training and continued professional development to stay up to date with standards and requirements. You want them to be independent, to give you trustworthy advice, and to give that advice clearly in a way that you can understand and is easy for you to access. You want to be able to rely on them. You want to be able to hold them to account if things go wrong. But you also want them to think ahead for you. You want them to provide value beyond, perhaps what you might even know when you go into the relationship. You want them to be able to use their professional expertise to give you the best possible advice and to help you think ahead for what's best for you. And these are all the things that we want our standards to support and to assure in our members and firms as well. So professional ethics means more than just complying with the law or complying with a narrow set of rules. Professional ethics, acting ethically, is really about doing the right thing. And sometimes that can be very difficult. Sometimes that might mean that you have to give that trusted independent advice to a client who doesn't want to hear it. It might mean that you need to think about who might be harmed by professional services or decisions that you're being asked to put into effect. And you might have to act in the public interest to think about, actually, should you do that? The whole world relies on professional judgment. It relies on us being able to trust professionals to act properly. And that's because the services that professionals provide can be incredibly harmful when they go wrong. and incredibly beneficial when they go right. So I've picked two examples here, one that you I hope will be familiar with, one that you may be less familiar with, which show what can happen when professionals act properly and when professionals act poorly. So the picture on the left is Dr. Anthony Fauci, who I'm sure many of you will recognise. He was in charge of providing advice to the American government about how to manage the COVID pandemic. And you'll know that often his advice was extremely unpalatable to the president that he served. But he gave a marvelous quote, which I really like, which I think really shows why professional ethics are important. And he said, I felt that if I stepped down, that would leave a void. Someone's got to be not afraid to speak the truth. The idea that they knew that nonsense could not be spouted without my pushing back on it, I felt was important. So that's about that being an independent, trusted advisor, that you're not just saying what your client wants to hear, that you're saying what's actually best for them, and more importantly, best for the other people that might be affected by the decision that your client is going to make. The other example that I wanted to give you relates to a company here in the UK, which was taken over by the man in the picture, Philip Green. And as part of that takeover, Mr. Green stripped out the assets from the pension fund. And he was helped to do that by a number of directors and advisors who were professional people, accountants, solicitors. Um, and when this was investigated by the UK Parliament, they talked about how those professionals have provided a veneer of credibility to the BHS group while disengaging from the key decisions that they had to scrutinise. They also talked about the auditors having improperly given the company a clean bill of health over a number of years, meaning that opportunities were missed to stop the stripping of the pension fund. Obviously, that had an incredibly damaging effect on the pensioners of that company, who were then left without the pensions that they had worked so hard for, and many of them sort of left in destitution. So that just goes to show why doing the right thing can be so important. We've recently changed our rules of conduct, which are our kind of overarching ethical standards. And we wanted to do that because it's so important to us that those are really easy for our members to understand and put into practice, but also for our clients and stakeholders to understand so that they can have that confidence. Rules of conduct aren't a straightforward tick list. What they do is they support professional judgment, because our members work across so many different circumstances. And we expect them as professionals to be able to make ethical decisions. But what the rules of conduct do is they provide some key principles and then some examples of the kinds of behaviours that would that would comply with those key principles. There were some things that we also really wanted to make sure that we were clear about in our rules of conduct, key kind of challenges for our professionals and for the world at the moment. And those were about respect, diversity and inclusion. So making sure that people, clients, employees, anyone that a firm or member comes into contact with is treated with respect, whatever their difference is, and that we make the profession a place where people can be themselves and thrive. That we respond to the ethical risks around evolving technology, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but also to emphasise the role of expertise in tackling global challenges, in particular sort of challenges around climate change, around sustainability. The fact that the advice that our members give can be really important in helping their clients to move towards a more sustainable approach to property. Again, I would imagine that nothing on this page, which are the principles in our new rules of conduct, is going to come as a surprise to you. These are all the kinds of things that you would expect to see if I said to you, what do you expect a person that you're employing to do professional work for you to do, to abide by? So obviously, honesty and integrity are incredibly important. You have to be able to trust the professionals that you're working with, but society also has to be able to trust professionals. So this isn't just doing what your client wants. Again, this is this piece about acting with integrity, about doing the right thing. Maintaining and acting within your competence. Obviously, what you want is people who will tell you if a piece of work is something that they can't do, and will make sure that the people doing the job for you are able to do it to a high standard. Providing good quality service, so communicating with you well, making sure that you're clear and transparent, that you know what you're going to pay and what services you're going to get for that. I've already talked about respect and encouraging diversity and inclusion. And also that piece about public interest, taking responsibility, making sure that what you do maintains public confidence in the profession. These are all really important to us. They're key. And as I said, what they've got beneath them are examples of how you might expect a firm or a member to behave to meet these requirements. There's a lot of supporting information on our website. So there's a CPD module, which I think we're going to arrange for people who are attending this conference to have access to, so that you can understand a bit more about our professional standards and what we expect. There are also some case studies, some scenarios which show how the rules apply to some common practice issues, which you can again have access to by just going to our website, and also an ethics decision tree, because making an ethical decision, it often involves a careful thinking process. You know, these are often finely balanced decisions where you've got competing interests and competing concerns, and you as the professional need to have really carefully thought about what steps you're going to take. So we have a decision tree that helps to identify those questions and those processes that you'll want to go through. We also have a number of standards available again on our website to anybody who would like to look, which support practice beyond just the rules of conduct. So really importantly for FM, we've got our International Building Operations Standard, which is a benchmarking process which helps to provide consistency in benchmarking across a range of factors which help good sustainable buildings operations. So that's a really interesting document to go and look at. It's available on our website. I would encourage you to go and take a look, and maybe talk to the professionals that you work with about whether this is something that they want to adopt in their work. We also have standards around, as you would expect, conflict of interest, bribery and corruption, client money handling, all of those things which you would expect to see from a professional. RICS obviously has standards for itself, but those standards work best when they're in the context of, everybody who is involved across a property transaction also being ethical. It's very hard if someone can go round you to another property professional and not get the same level of ethics. So we are a member of the International Ethics Standards Coalition. Our standards line up with those ethical standards, which applies to all real estate and related specialisms, and has a large number of professional bodies across the world signed up to it. So again, that's something that I would encourage you to go and look at. You may find that if you belong to a professional body, it also belongs to the IES, and our standards line up with theirs. I wanted to look at a couple of specific examples of the kinds of ethical issues that you might come across in FM work in particular. So obviously part of operating a building well is collecting information about who uses your buildings and spaces, how they're being used, and how that affects the well-being of users. But just because you can collect data doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And obviously you need to think really carefully about how you use that data once you've collected it. What would people coming into your building reasonably expect their information to be used for? Have you told them how you're using it? Is there a way that they can find out what is happening to, any information that you collect about them? And is any of that information sensitive? Would you reasonably expect that to be private? So one of the examples that we use a lot is a company here in the UK that included sort of monitoring software on its computer systems for people about when they were at their desk and when they weren't. so that would keep, that would keep a lot of information about perhaps when people needed to use the lavatory, or were away from their desk for other reasons. And people were very worried about what that information was going to be used for. What, why was the company collecting it? And they hadn't really been clear about it. So it's really important when you think about what you're collecting to think about the privacy of those users. What is it reasonable? Why are you collecting the data? What are you using it for? What have you told them? These are all, key ethical considerations when you think about what information that you're using and keeping. Does it have to be personal? Could it be anonymized, for example? These are all things that you'll want to think about. The other thing that may well be part of doing business where all of us work are gifts and hospitality. We work with suppliers, we work with other professionals, we work with clients, and all of that might involve an element of, culturally, or as part of doing business, some involvement of gifts and hospitality. But obviously what's really important is that you're not accepting or offering a bribe. Not all gifts and hospitality are bribes. It's a bribe is something which is meant to induce somebody to do something which is unethical or illegal, or breaches a duty of trust. So obviously, a small gift, or hospitality at an event which is intended to improve a working relationship, or to say thank you for a service that's been provided, are not going to be bribes. That's a normal part of doing business. But you need to think really carefully before you accept any gifts or hospitality about why are you being given this? What does the person expect from it? Are you maybe making an important decision, which where you might then be swayed to act in a particular way, or somebody looking from the outside might think that you might have been swayed to act in a particular way, based on some gift or hospitality, particularly if it's very generous. The higher the value of the gift or hospitality, the more likely it is to be seen as something suspicious. And obviously gifts and hospitality from suppliers, particularly where you make tendering decisions, is going to have to be much more carefully considered than maybe from clients or from fellow professionals. But it's about, again, going through that process of thinking, I've been offered this. Why am I being offered this? What might somebody looking from the outside think? It's just as unethical to agree to pay a bribe, or to offer a bribe or a facilitation payment, as it is to accept one. You're preventing fair competition. It's almost certainly illegal, and I can't think of a country in the world in which it's not illegal to pay a bribe or a facilitation payment, even where that law might be circumvented quite often. And also, usually, often what it does is it diverts the public or stakeholders' money from what it's intended for, what people think it's being used for, into improper purposes. And the last thing I would say is that when you're talking about professional ethics, it's always really important that a culture is set from the top of an organization. So if you're responsible for your organization, it's really important that you talk about this stuff. It's really important that you have the right processes in place, that you're clear about the things that are unacceptable to you, and that you support your colleagues in, for example, explaining why they might need to perhaps turn down a gift or hospitality where it doesn't meet your company's procedures. And that's much easier, of course, if you can say, my company has a procedure which says that I can't accept this, rather than I'm making a decision that I can't accept this. So think about the culture in your firm and what you, particularly as leaders in your firm, can do to encourage a good, strong, ethical culture that protects you, but also provides confidence to your clients and other stakeholders. I hope that's been helpful. It's been a really good opportunity for me to just run through some of the key ethical considerations and processes that we talk to our members about all the time. I'm sorry I can't answer questions because I'm not there in person, but I'm sure if you have any questions and you would like to contact me, that FM Africa would be happy to pass on my email address. And thank you again for the opportunity, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.